Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Triple Option Podcast. I'm your co-host, Sharon Douglas, along with Nate Autry and Avi Dingery. We have quite a bit of topics to discuss today, including Georgia finally taking down Alabama in the national championship game, as well as the craziness happening in the transfer portal, and where do we think our teams are going to finish in 2022 and within this offseason alone. And we hope you enjoy this podcast. So, moving on to the national championship game, our very first topic of tonight's podcast. Me and Nate both, along with Abby, were rooting heavily for Georgia. Nate, as a fan of another SEC West program in Ole Miss, what was your reaction to the ruler of the SEC West finally falling?
So, as you aptly pointed out, Tarun, I am a fan of an SEC West program, being Ole Miss, of course. And so, the amount of times I've seen Ole Miss be brutalized by Alabama has led me to the point where I want to cheer against them. That's not to say I dislike Georgia naturally, or that, I think they're a bad team. I don't have any particular strong feelings towards them.
You
It's more
never
my
root for
feelings
your
against
enemies.
Alabama. Exactly. Enemy of your enemy is your friend, per se. So I was cheering against Alabama. And,
Yeah.
when they get that pick six at the end of the game, I was excited as anyone.
Yeah. It was a great game. Abby, you had something?
When Alabama loses, America wins. So that's just a thing in
That's
sports.
actual.
No one gets better without an Alabama win, especially with how their fans are with winning and the sportsmanship that some of them possess. But it was a good game overall. Very good defensive game plan by Georgia,
Yeah.
and a really big influence on this game.
Hopefully, this is like a reality check for Alabama fans who, notoriously are known for leaving their games early just for winning. And Nick Saban even complained about it this year at a press conference where he talked about when I first came here, people were excited to win, and now they're not. So I think that's interesting. And that's a good point to
That's
bring up,
a,
Bobby.
that's such an Alabama problem to have, though.
I mean, it is, but nevertheless, there's a problem.
Yeah.
Getting back to the game, I would say that one of the major changes that Georgia made going to this game was their defense played the way we've seen them play throughout most of this year. I mean, their number one defense, the number one scoring defense in the nation for a reason, and they did not show in the SEC championship, but they did in this game.
Yeah, that if you do look at these numbers, Alabama's run game got completely shut down. Only 30 yards of rushing yards for Alabama. They really dialed in on that rushing unit and that elite defensive line. But I would like to point out the pressure that they sent at Bryce Young this game was insane, and he looked like a deer in basically the headlights in every snap. Just multiple blitzers and defenders coming at him every play, and he didn't have enough time to make the decisions. As you see, he threw for 57 times. No quarterback should ever have to throw for 57 times, especially in a championship game.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
think Georgia's D line was a major contributor to their defensive success. On one hand, you have Bijan Robertson, who's been a monster all year, get completely shut down. I mean, and Alabama's rushing attack in general being held to 30 yards is ridiculous. I mean, no one would have expected that to happen if it wasn't for this Georgia team. And
Yeah.
secondly, I think Georgia's passion. I mean, when you're able to shut down their rushing game and allow Georgia's D linemen, who are all elite, to simply pin their ears back and just rush the quarterback, I mean, it's dangerous. And we see not Matt Corral. I wish it was Matt Corral in that game. Bryce Young get exposed for what I personally believe has been his weakness all year is like under pressure, he does not necessarily find his release route or be smart with the ball. He tends to throw it away or get sacked. So we saw that in this game.
Yeah. To be fair, that's kind of something that happens to a lot of quarterbacks, but it's more apparent with Young, given like when he has time, he can really flex his talent. So when that time's taken away, it can be a steep fall. I remember me and Nate were kind of giving the commentators some crap about calling Bryson a cool, calm, and collected quarterback, to quote the commentators, and we were asking for an example of when this was proven. Because other than a late game drive against Auburn, which Nate has instructed me not to question the officiating, there really hasn't been many cases of him showing his
I mean,
complexion
you
is
go back and
impacting.
look at the Florida game this year at the Swamp. And the crowd noise definitely could have been a factor. It wasn't necessarily in this game; it was just a rush. But that's another thing I think Bryce Young's weaknesses have been crowd games. You look at how he played against A&M and Florida while he was at their stadiums versus how he played against good teams like Ole Miss and Arkansas at home. I mean, you see big differences. But yeah, I think that, like you said, it is an issue with many quarterbacks. But you have to understand, this is the Heisman winner we're talking about here. We can't
Yeah,
just
exactly.
compare him to any standard.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I think another thing that Georgia changed was their O line. So I guess on both sides of the ball, their lines played better. Matt Luke's O line, obviously Matt Luke is former Ole Miss head coach. They played well. I mean, they allowed their quarterback, not necessarily the most talented, but they allowed him time, and he found reads. He even found a couple deep shots against Alabama, which is not necessarily something you would normally see.
Yeah. Also, when it comes to Georgia's D line, that was played very well. Kobe Dean, especially leading that team. I want to talk about Jordan Davis though, because very much a fan favorite. Even some people calling him to win the Heisman. But you saw during the second half of the national championship game, he really wasn't played much at all. And remember, this guy's projected as like a first round pick. Do you think that impacts his draft?
I will
Not
say,
his draft.
I yeah, I will say one thing that is like interior defensive linemen are not stat getters. The biggest like aspect of a defensive lineman is how many blocks can they attract. If you were
I
watching the
know.
game, all the pressure is coming from Georgia's outside their defensive ends, and that's because he's sitting there in the middle, right? And he's getting 2 or 3 blocks, which allows him to go 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 on the outside.
I know.
So you
I'm
can't
not
necessarily
looking at his
judge his
stats.
statistical
I know.
performance.
I'm
It's
not
more
looking
of
at
his
his stats. I'm
overall.
looking at his like endurance.
I
Because
I mean, it's hard to tell when like you don't really notice a D lineman unless they either make a play or pressure the quarterback. And when you're talking about
no, but like
interior
I look
defensive
back at the
linemen,
film after the game, and he was out for a lot of plays
so if he was
because when
out,
they did run hurry up. And
if he was out, I guarantee you it's probably some sort of NFL. But I don't know.
eh,
I mean,
I
I did
wouldn't say
not
so
watch the
because like
film,
it's a
so
national championship game, and he's one of the leaders of that team. But I would say obviously the always player comp for him is like a Vita Vea, just like a big, really strong dude.
I mean, man is a beast. He is a freak
Yeah,
athlete
but
to be
I
sure.
think if he wants to make a solid NFL career, I think he's what 380, 360 right now. I think 360 is what he was at. But
You
I
double
think he
check
has to
that.
cut some weight in order to have a more sustainable career.
I mean, usually what happens with like a lot of linemen as they transition to NFL is technique. They learn technique because big and strong doesn't only can only translate so much into the NFL. I mean, it
Yeah,
takes being a Derrick Henry or a Bosa type player in order to
I'll
like
rant
be
about.
that big and that strong.
Yeah, don't worry, Nate. I'll rant about O line development during my Texas football segment. Uh,
But so one more topic to discuss about this game is how does this bode for each of these programs moving forwards? After this game, going into 2022 and beyond. How
I
would you do?
think I think it. I don't think it creates like a endless Georgia dynasty, but I think
Wow,
it.
what a take if that were your take.
No, but I think it. I think Georgia's going to be a more common contender in the more common member of the playoff than it has been in the past. 'Cause it's only been in the playoff what twice? No, twice, right? Yeah,
I
two or
think
three
so. Yes,
times,
it was the year with Tua, and then
and then this
now.
year. So I think they'll be a lot more consistent in their appearance in the playoffs again because I think when you finally get over that hump, get over the hill that is Alabama and like winning the national championship, getting to the hill all of a sudden becomes a lot more easier if that analogy makes any sense.
Yeah, I get what you're trying to say there.
Yeah,
As for Alabama, and I'll talk about this, I'm not gonna lie, I think this probably doesn't affect them. If anything, it'll help Nick Saban sell some sort of
rat
underdog
poison.
mentality. And no, but I think Nick Saban's already proven that. I mean, he won't win it every
Best
year,
coach of
but
all
he's gonna
time.
win it 2 out of 3 years. So yeah, I mean, but it is good to see I mean, the third and fourth quarter, you can watch Nick Saban. You know how the coaches always handshake after the game. He goes and tells Kirby Smart that he just got outplayed in the fourth quarter, and so it's interesting to see. I think Alabama is just still is one of the more complete teams in the nation. I mean, they have a great offense and a great defense,
Yeah.
and so I don't know how much they'll be affected. You know, as long as Nick Saban's there, they'll still be able to recruit and develop players. But I agree with you that Georgia is definitely now a player to be considered when talking about the national championship going forwards.
Yeah, and I think Georgia could almost become like a Clemson, but with like be more sustainable because they'd probably be more willing to change to adjust their philosophy. Because Clemson's very pro hiring from within, and I think Georgia is a lot more willing to go outside of the box. That like this offseason they're probably gonna upgrade Will Muschamp to the DC. That would only make sense. Great defensive mind after landing leaves Oregon. But I think if they don't get stuck in the trap of if they as long as they don't get stuck in the trap of not innovating their offense or defense like Clemson did with their offense, they should be fine.
Yeah, but we'll see. And obviously, the national championship is the end of college football season, and so as we move forward, we're shifting now into off-season gears. And one of the bigger topics of the off-season is the transfer portal, which we've seen many teams make many moves and many players make many moves.
Yeah.
So let's discuss some of that now.
The transfer portal.
How about you start with your favorite transfer portal moment, Tarun? I wonder what that could be.
See, let me think. You ever hear of a guy named Quinn Ewers? Eastern quarterback at Ohio State.
I don't think I've heard of his name before. No,
Yeah.
is he like 100 overall recruit or something like that?
Technically, it's 1.00. Autry, you got to get your facts together.
But
But
no,
yeah,
everyone.
all jokes
That's
all
not how
jokes
they
aside,
talk about it, Tarun. That's just
all
not how.
jokes.
That's not how it's discussed, Tarun. You're so silly, Tarun.
Don't worry about Autry.
Like,
But yeah, I'd say Quinn Ewers is really big for the Texas program because lack of both quarterback recruiting and quarterback development is kind of what started this whole will Texas ever be back. Because one of the main reasons Mac Brown got fired in, I believe it was 2012 or 2013, was lack of development at the quarterback position. Because Mac Brown bought so much into Garrett Gilbert, now a third stringer for the Cowboys. He refused to further develop that position and recruit that position. That ultimately led to his downfall as a coach at Texas. And the same issues happened with Charlie Strong, never a consistent quarterback. Herman is quite different. Sam Ellinger saved that man's career. Because while Sam Ellinger wasn't the best technical quarterback, that dude would run through a brick wall to ensure Texas would win. And Sarkisian again had quarterback issues, mostly injury related, but still. So establishing someone like Quinn Ewers and bringing in someone like Malik Murphy, who threw 80-yard bombs as a freshman and is mobile. I think if Sarkisian can prove his title as a quote-unquote quarterback guru, and obviously he has a pass to attest to that, helping develop Matt Leinart, other quarterbacks, USC, Washington, Bama. Granted, at Bama he had Lane Kiffin help. I'm ranting here, but I think with the current state of the program at Texas with its coaches, I think transfer portal is definitely. I think Quinn Ewers is definitely the biggest win for a program that needs to get back.
mm-hmm. But I mean, although Quinn Ewers is probably the quote unquote best player to go into the portal, he's not the only portal move that's happened.
Definitely
There's
not.
certainly been a lot of them. I mean, just to
Currently,
name
there's
a few, you
near
have.
2,000 players in the portal, which is
Yeah,
insane.
I mean, the portal is basically opened up, and the biggest part about the portal is NCAA approving the one-time no sitting out a year transfer, right? And
And
so
media
suddenly
eligibility.
players immediate eligibility per se.
Yeah.
And so suddenly players are able to go from being a backup at school to maybe taking a step down or maybe going somewhere where they can compete for a spot and potentially become a starter. So any players that aren't locked in or guaranteed a job are seeing an opportunity and taking it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the biggest moves everyone looks at are quarterbacks. And there've been a lot of quarterbacks. We got Dylan Gabriel from USC to Oklahoma for Robbie's team. You got
UCF.
from UCF, my bad. I said USC,
Yeah.
didn't I? From you got Bo Nix going to Oregon. You have Caleb Williams leaving Oklahoma, which is most likely due to Jeff Levy
Can we just say that
firing
he's
for
going
some
to
reason.
USC at this point? Like,
He's not confirmed USC, but Jackson Dart has entered the portal, who was a starter for USC last year after Keaton Slovis' injury. Keaton Slovis, by the way, is going to Pittsburgh. So yeah, it's just been madness. Teams without a quarterback, such as Ole Miss, are basically just resetting their quarterback position and trying to find someone with experience, while players like teams with depth at quarterback are suddenly just losing that depth because players want to start now. They want to play now.
yeah. Also, some other moves. Casey Thompson going to Nebraska. Um, quarterback of Texas led the Big 12 in passing touchdowns. Um, also some big receiver moves such as Isaiah Nayor looking to go to Tennessee. Um,
Committed to Tennessee. One thing that's interesting to point out about the portal is there is no letter of intent like there is in normal football recruiting.
it's
And
kind of
players,
odd,
although they
but
can commit, aren't required to do anything really. They can say whatever they want, and it doesn't matter until they enroll at the school they say they're going to attend.
yeah, and I believe the reason for that is
Shock
like
that
most of the
opinions.
documentation you sign when you commit is mostly NCAA documentation. So once you're already in the system, like
Hmm. So, but that doesn't exist for portal transfers. You see, I mean, it's all just registering for the new school. So until you register the
yeah,
class
they
at the new
basically just have to
school,
enroll.
it's all word of mouth.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we'll see. Going forwards, I think the NCAA is kind of opened up just an unregulated landscape here. I mean, there is no window for players to transfer in. It's the way you look at the transfer portal now, it is essentially free agency in the NFL. I mean, I think Albie can attest to this. One of the main important things about the free agency in the NFL is there's a limited window. I mean, you can't just leave at any time of the year. You have to leave,
in the free
during your off
agency.
season or in free agency periods. And I think that will have a huge effect because I mean, this hasn't happened yet, but theoretically speaking, you would have players leaving between teams mid-year, mid-season, like between weeks, and that would just be insane. So I think the NCAA going forward needs to set up a similar type of window for college football.
Yeah, I'll be as a fan of the Oklahoma Sooners who have kind of been kicked in the ass by the transfer portal. What's your opinion?
I mean, as a team's perspective, it's been horrible. Like just like losing all these players out, especially to USC. But I think it's very in sports in general. There's just been a recent wave of like I guess player empowerment, whether it be like professionally or in college, and I think that's good for the sport for like the actual players itself. You know, the amount of money that the people make off of them, they should have the ability to choose where they want to go and make those decisions. Like, because college is not everything, and this this is not my bias, but I think this is somewhat important for just like the general future of the transfer portal. But the Caleb Williams decision right now, you know, coming in as a freshman, balling out, and like putting himself on the transfer portal, saying, "Hey, offer me what you got. Show me what I'm worth to you," because he wants to be that number one overall pick. And I think a lot of players
Uh,
might follow this. I'm not saying he is the number one overall pick, but like he wants to be. He's like highly recruited, and there's a
He has
lot in his
potential to be.
future. Hmm?
yeah,
He
But
can be.
he can be. He's not like for sure the number one player, but it's good. It's good for the players, and I'm glad that this is happening. For like as Nate said, a lot of players who like will be stuck as backups can now go and compete in other schools for the starter
yeah,
position.
that's another way Oklahoma kind of got screwed because Tanner Mordecai, I believe another quarterback went to TCU, would have both been backups to Dylan Gabriel if, and God forbid, he get hurt. You only have Nick Evers, who's a freshman, true freshman. So
I think now it's probably going to be a lot harder for certain teams to try to do like
yeah,
stack up on quarterbacks, like stack up on a position. So like
Yes.
The very infamously known Alabama transition from Jalen Hurts to Tua Tagovailoa to Mac Jones, all NFL caliber quarterbacks. But I think it's gonna be hard for a bunch of other teams who could do that to do that now because a lot of players don't want to wait. They can just go to a different school and play there. And
Yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah, I think
I
that's a good
remember.
point that you bring up, Albie, about depth being an issue because hopefully this will. I mean, you would think that this would equalize player depth with teams, but with the introduction of NIL, it most likely isn't, which is kind of sad to
Well,
say.
I would push back on that because like my view on NIL is while it definitely is increasing the amount of money in players' pockets, it's mostly taking that stuff from out under the table.
I would
Like
agree. That's a fair point.
as three programs that have definitely dealt money to get recruits, with only Ole Miss getting caught.
Pain.
Well, actually, no. I'll push back on that. Most schools have been caught. Just Ole Miss is one of the few schools that
Ole Miss is the only one
doesn't
that
have
got
the influence to push
assaulted
back
by.
against it.
Yeah, exactly. That is a perfect way to frame it. We don't have the influence to push back against it. That
Speaking
basically
of that,
sums it
like
up.
I remember, like you remember that documentary? Who was that one linebacker? Like Lewis, Landon Lewis. That's what his name was. He was basically one of the top linebackers in Mississippi, and basically he was one of the contributors to Ole Miss's suspension. But
And I wonder what school he went to. I wonder what school he attended.
some
Convenient. Well,
small
okay,
technical
but
school in
that's in the past.
Starkville.
That's a bygone situation. I
Yeah.
mean, I think and a transfer portal tying with NIL. You mean you're looking at many players who are transferring. I mean, one of the bigger appeals of USC is the fact that it's situated in LA, which is a large city, large
Yeah, but
market.
like
That
LA
means
is like
large
a
NIL
big
deals.
college football town. It really hasn't been for a while.
It's not, but suddenly you have like if USC can get relevant, there is a lot of money available in LA.
Yeah, true, but like, I bet you 1 year ago, 1 in 10, only like 1 in 10 people in USC knew who Lincoln Riley was.
I mean, that's just. I mean, that's just
Maybe not one in
overall.
10, but maybe like 3 in 10.
I mean, just that's not even a statistic to me. You're just making up numbers at this point. But
Those are
what I'm
true,
trying to
and
say is that,
that's
like, I
the
think
best stats around.
I think bigger cities and bigger markets are appealing to players now, and they're using their free transfer to go and get the bag per se.
Yeah, the thing about it, like I'll attest to this as a Texas fan. One of the key selling points that UT is using is we're in Austin, right? One of the fastest growing cities in the country. And then it's like Bijan Robinson has $1 million in endorsement deals. Xavier Worthy has like I think 500K. I think Quinn Ewers is getting something like 4 million a year, which is absolutely absurd.
I mean, but you're not even the most absurd when you look at A&M, who's rumored to have spent $27 million to get the number one overall recruiting class and 6 5-stars. So yeah, overall, like
Yeah,
this
when
year
those
is
Aggies finished not 8-5 4 years later and fired Jimbo Fisher, we'll see who's laughing.
yeah, but this year is an off season like no other. I mean, there has never been an off season. There was
Yeah,
NIL last year, but it was not the
but
it
COVID.
did not have the effect upon recruiting that it does now. And couple that with the completely unregulated transfer rules. I mean, you've already seen, I think, like probably over 10 major quarterbacks move all over the nation. And so we're looking at college football just being completely different next year.
Yeah,
But
the
I
thing
think
about
that's
the transfer
probably,
portal, in my opinion, I think if you want to transfer immediately from school, I know this kind of like takes Quinn Ewers away from Texas, but like I think you have to stay at school for at least like 1-2 years, at least 2 years before you transfer out of there. Cause like the way I see it, one of the beautiful things about college football is the fact that it's not the NFL. I think the transfer portal, along with making it easier for coaches to leave their jobs and look for better jobs, turns it more and more into professional football, which I think could possibly be a dangerous place if you want to preserve the uniqueness of the great sport that college football is.
Uh-huh. I mean, it's definitely interesting, and we'll have to see. We'll track it as it goes forward. There may be new rules passed by NCAA, but
Yeah,
I mean, I think we're gonna transition now into our individual team recaps, which is something new we're interested
yeah.
in now. To
Let's.
start
I believe
off,
the first one up is
yeah, it's
the
me.
Good
And
old
so,
Rebels
Ole
of
Miss.
Ole Miss.
yeah,
So
what we're gonna talk about, what I'm gonna talk about, I should say, is what's happened basically between the end of the season, which is, sad loss to Baylor in the Sugar Bowl, to basically just going forward up until this point. And so one of the first things is we got our early signing day, which is basically the new signing day class. And I mean, there aren't many big names. We didn't get a quarterback. We did get Deron Willis, who's a four-star linebacker, and Xavier Harris, who's been a long-time commit. So we did get those players. We finished with, I think it was like a top 25 recruiting class, and a lot of Ole Miss fans have been concerned why our recruiting has taken a slight downwards turn after a 10-3 year,
I mean,
and
I think
then that
it's kind of
includes a bowl game.
obvious.
Rude. This is not your segment. Be
Yes,
silent.
Rudy.
I shall comment wherever I please. Sit down, little program.
Okay. To continue what I was saying, but I mean the reasoning behind for which Lane Kiffin and his staff have taken this direction became apparent as the offseason kind of progressed. We've gotten, I think, 7 transfer commits so far, highlighted by former 5-star, number 1 overall Texas, and I think number 1 or 2 running back in the nation, Zach Evans, transferring from TCU to Ole Miss, along with Darius Tennison, a 4 or 5-star defensive back from Auburn, and several other good players in the transfer portal. While we have had success in the transfer portal, one thing that has kind of hurt is coaching losses. We've lost our offensive and defensive coordinators, Jeff Levy to Oklahoma and DJ Durkin to A&M, who were hired at the same position, surprisingly. They did not get improved hires. They just got the same jobs at a different school. And additionally, we lost Marquise Watson, who was one of our bigger recruiters, Kevin Smith, our running backs coach. Marquise Watson went to Rutgers, and Kevin Smith went to Miami. And so yeah, we just had a lot of coaching losses. To replace these people, we've promoted Chris Partridge, who was our co-defensive coordinator. We've promoted him to over. Well, we haven't officially promoted him, but it looks like we're going to promote him to our defensive coordinator role. We've hired Charlie Weiss Jr., who previously worked with Kiffin at FAU to be our offensive coordinator. And we've hired a running back coach from Houston, whose name is escaping me at this moment. I'll have to check on that. But overall, I mean, going forwards, it's clear that Ole Miss has taken a very direct approach in terms of signing new players this year. We have, I think the number was like 13 or 14. We've lost 14 players, 13 or 14 players to the transfer portal. But when you consider that NCAA has changed the amount of players that you're allowed to have on your roster, I think this is simply a fact where players who weren't looking to start left because they weren't looking to start, and so they were looking out for themselves, and that's not to say anything about the coaching staff or the direction of the program. It was just almost trying to get down to the correct number of players on the roster. This, as we speak now, which is Sunday the 16th, this past weekend we had Jackson Dart and Michael Trigg, 2 big players who have entered the transfer portal from USC. One major problem, not so much problem, but potential problem, is that Ole Miss hasn't gotten a new quarterback this year. We only have Luke Altmaier and Kincaid Dent on the roster as scholarship quarterbacks. So if Ole Miss were to get Michael Trigg, which I would say we have a good chance, considering the other school is Oklahoma, and they have already gotten their own quarterback transfer, and we get Michael Trigg, who is a tight end, which is something that Ole Miss was missing very badly this year. They only had one scholarship tight end on the roster, and he was injured. Um, that would be a really big turnaround. If we were to get a former 5-star quarterback and a former 5-star running back, we could potentially continue momentum going into next year. We'll have to see on how Michael Trigg commits. And we should know by the end of the month because of when classes start for the spring semester. But overall, I mean, a lot of turnover, but there's still a bright future for Ole Miss. As long as we have Lane Kiffin, I think there's still tremendous upside. We just have to see if it plays out. think Tarun, you're up next.
Okay, so the residential Texas fan is in the house to convince the audience a vague reasoning for why we will be back next year. But in all reality, the Texas offseason after a disappointing 5-7 season. I'd grade the offseason I'd grade Sarkisian's offseason in A minus, given how deep of a dive the season took compared to last season in terms of record alone. Culture is very weak. A lot of players left. We brought in quite a strong recruiting class. I think once, according to some websites such as On3, which obviously is considered the best, but still there, once we're expected to sign a 5-star O-lineman by the name of Devon Campbell in February, we should have, I believe, 3 to even 4 5-stars, depending on some websites, and that's including Quinn Ewers. So obviously recruiting is on pretty well. Transfer portal, we have gotten, I believe, 3 guys so far, and we're expected to get a 4th out from TCU and LaShawn Mathis, very good edge rusher. Needs a bigger frame, but with strength and conditioning, that shouldn't be a problem. Those 3 players being obviously Quinn Ewers, and Quinn Ewers, no need to explain him further. Ryan Watts, a boundary corner from Ohio State, and Jaleel Billingsley, more receiving style tight end out of Bama, who's definitely hyped up. There's a lot of potential for him when Sark was there at Alabama, but because O'Brien's offense requires more of a blocking tight end, he didn't fit as well. So I think there's a lot of potential for him at Texas. When it comes to actual coaching hires, we've lost 2 coaches. So our running backs coach, Stan Drayton, was hired away to become the head coach at Temple, which I think when a coach is hired.
Tarun, your mic just cut out completely.
Yeah, I mean, I can continue that thought for him. I think what Tarun was probably trying to say here is that if you're losing a position coach, which is a running back coach, for a head coaching job, obviously, I mean, you're doing something right. There are not many coaches who are going to turn down, I mean, such a major job increase. So you can't really view that as a loss for Texas.
Yeah, so I'm saying it's like almost a win because like it establishes more of a winning culture. It's like, hey, like why can't the players move up? Like the coaches, the minute Sarkisian got here, now they're moving up because Stan Drayton, the coach Stan Drayton, that our former running backs coach, was a Herman guy.
And if you need an example of this, just look at Alabama. They lose their coordinators every other year. I mean, Nick Saban.
But the culture's still going strong, so the team is
Exactly.
still doing fine.
Mm.
And that's what I think Texas could be going to if they keep this up. I'm not saying they're going to become the next Bama. I'm not that crazy.
Yeah.
But moving on to the former receivers coach, Andre Coleman. So a guy that, in my opinion, Sarkisian kept some of the wrong guys from Herman's staff. I think he should have kept the defensive staff. Chris Ash's defense. That defense was doing well last year, and I think bringing in another defense coordinator would just improve, causing him more troubles. I'm not saying fire Pete Kukowski, our current defense coordinator. That's idiotic after 1 year, but that's a mistake I think he made. And I think another mistake he made was keeping Andre Coleman, our receivers coach. The thing about Andre Coleman is he isn't great at developing recently. The peak of his success was at Ohio State, and this was like a while. It was like when Braxton Miller moved from quarterback to receiver, which is ages ago. Like this is like JT Barrett times, and obviously he worked a lot with Herman when he was at Ohio State, and I believe Houston as well. And the conflict between Sarkisian and Andre Coleman is Andre Coleman. His recruiting mentality is he'll obviously offer all the 5-stars, but his main focus is like scrappier players who will fight for every yard. And while Sarkisian has definitely taken some of those guys in our class, such as Savion Red, and Jaden Blue, which is interesting name combo if they both go to running back. But Sarkisian's recruiting focus has always been on big guys, right? Which sounds like an obvious thing, but for some reason, Andre Coleman, that was never really his focus. So we let him go. We took in Brendan Marion, the receiver coach from Pittsburgh, as the new receivers coach and the passing game coordinator. And for the running backs coach, we took Tashard Choice, Georgia Tech. Tashard Choice, very good recruiter, a lot of connections to the DFW area, which I think is critical for Texas success, as OU has kicked our ass when recruiting there in past years. And Brennan Marion, as a receivers coach, has a lot of connections in DFW as well. In fact, some of the top receiver trainers in DFW say that Brennan Marion is the best coach that they know, which isn't saying that he will get 100% succeed at Texas, but that's a good message for recruiting because when the top level recruits are talking to these guys all the time and they keep hearing Brennan Marion's names, that's obviously a good thing for Texas. That all said, I think what's going to happen next year, I think not including a bowl game, we go. Let me think here. We go eight
We're
and
not we're
four.
not doing a record prediction. I mean, I think it's
Yeah,
too early to
but
tell. I think
yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
think
Actually,
Texas.
yeah, too early to tell. But I think we improve next year, and I'll leave it at that.
Yes, let's hope you improve next year.
That's probably a more mature assessment because at this point, there's no hoping in Texas. It's all prayer.
Yes, I mean you have a great quarterback coming in, and you have a good staff that's returning. So there's definitely
Yeah,
potential. We'll see.
that's the one thing I like about one last thing before we get on to the Sooners. I think that Sarkisian has gone two things right that both coaching staffs have gotten wrong previously. So, like I was saying before, Charlie Strong, great person as a head coach. Remember this, like players love playing for Charlie Strong. Like you would go to war for Charlie Strong, but his scheme never really worked. His coaching kind of sucked. Herman kind of had trouble in both areas, where his scheme was okay. It definitely worked really well in some instances. Instances, I should rather say. But there's a very big culture problem because if you weren't a 5 star, if you weren't like a 5 star, like a major player, he wouldn't even talk to you. Like he'd ignore you if you said hi, which created a bad culture problem. A lot of players within the program were recruiting negatively against Texas. Because if you think about it, Herman's last season wasn't bad, 7-3, right, and not including bowl game. Let's say take the regular season back into account. LSU, given how the LSU team was, even though it was at Death Valley, I'd say we win that one. That's 8 wins. Then you have, I think, UTSA or Louisiana or some other school. That's a win. All of a sudden, that's a 9-win season. And interesting statistic, Herman was 13 points away last year from an undefeated season.
Yeah, there were a lot of close losses and wins in the 2020
So
season.
Herman's issue wasn't the actual game. It was just the culture surrounding the team. And a lot of people think that Sam Ellinger was the main reason for his success. Because a lot of times the plays broke down, he just ran. And that guy's had like knee issues in the NFL, knee and hip, because he was basically a battering ram at Texas.
Yeah.
And I think
So I mean,
Sarkisian.
yeah.
Oh yeah, you're saying something, Nate?
I just wanted to like sum up basically what you're trying to say, and that's that. I mean, you got a culture change in Texas. And you're not necessarily saying that your old culture was bad. I mean, Tom Herman, he was trying to take you guys in the direction, but Texas is a notoriously restless fan base.
No,
So
yeah.
they needed
I
they
know
needed
this
a
is going to
smile,
sound
and
unpopular
they
amongst
saw
Texas
an
fans, but
opportunity.
I think Tom Herman was a net positive on the program. He
Hmm.
built more of a winning culture,
Yes. So I mean, I think
but
that probably
he took
sums
it too
up.
far. He took it too far in trying to play the role of the hard ass coach. I think Sarkisian has to find the balance between the laid back dude and Charlie Strong, whose scheme wasn't great, and the super hard ass dude Herman, who had a decent scheme but just pissed off his players.
Hmm. So
So
yeah, I think that probably moves us on to the third member of our team, which is going to be Oklahoma and Avi. And so obviously, Avi overall has been more focused on NFL. But Avi, you have anything you want to contribute, particularly about Oklahoma?
Uh, I'm going to be honest. I think this is it's. I think anyone can clearly see it's not a very good off season for. Why I say off season? Like at least so far, it's not been very good for Oklahoma, especially like losing so many recruits and like current players to USC and other schools. And even though we have tried to fill in the holes, we've got Dylan Gabriel, to possibly replace Spencer rather, Caleb Williams, and we've gotten other holes filled in. It's just a lot of those resources. Like a very important thing in building a very good team is allocating your resources in recruiting. And one thing that was very key, and like the reaction that Oklahoma fans had towards Lincoln Riley leaving is a lot of his time was spent in that SoCal region and where USC is based, and we essentially lost a lot of that progress. So I'm not saying it's going to be a rebuild completely. We're not going to become like Kansas, but we're not going to be like the Oklahoma of a few years from now. It's going to take some time. It definitely depends on, with the new coaching staff, what we're able to do with Dylan Gabriel, or maybe if we keep Caleb Williams, because we're still going to be like one of those offensive schools where our identity is not based in defense, unlike our sister school, Oklahoma State. We're not going to like pride ourselves in the defense as much. We pride ourselves in our offense, but it's going to take a while for us to return back to our initial like successes. I don't think we're going to be title contenders for a very long time. I still think it's really between Bama and Georgia and maybe Ole Miss, depending on how their quarterback system goes on, like their recruiting. I think there's a lot of like I know Nate has covered this, but I think there's a lot of potential with Ole Miss, but I don't see that with Oklahoma right now. And
I'm gonna,
it's
yeah, I'm gonna take this. I think that was a very, was it pessimistic look on your
Very
future as a
depressing.
program? Because I'm gonna play the opposite. Then I'll go really positive for you guys. First of all, you've hired Brent Venables, who's formerly the highest paid assistant coach anywhere from a Clemson. Before this year, which obviously he lost a lot of talent, so you can't necessarily talk, and there are a lot of systematic issues at Clemson, which we won't get into. You're talking about a guy who has coached several playoff quality defenses, so I'm not sure about the whole we won't be like defensive. I think that's I mean, well, I agree that you have been an offensive school for a while. I think the hiring of Venables as the head coach kind of indicates your '80s desire to like be more defensive and more balanced as a team. And on the flip side, and this is probably my Ole Miss fan talking, you're getting Jeff Levy, a guy who turned Matt Corral, a guy who probably had like around 1,000 yards passing, lost his starting job to a freshman and didn't play and only started 4 out of 8 games into I think he was the highest graded quarterback last year, and he was like the number 7 in Heisman voting quarterback this year. So he definitely has the ability to unlock potential. In terms of the transfer market, you're most likely losing Caleb Williams, which does hurt considering, he was definitely a fan favorite,
You lost
especially
Mario
after
Williams as well.
oh yeah, Mari, that was a big loss for us. Our wide receiver core is deteriorating. We're no longer in the era of CD Lamb
Yeah,
and Marquise Brown. We're now with honestly, I don't even know.
yeah.
Everyone's
And I
gone.
think it's. I
but
think y'all's
on the
defense is
plus
gonna.
side, on the plus side, you're getting Dylan Gabriel, a highly talented quarterback who, and this is me being honest, he's been coached by Gus Malzahn this past year. I mean, of course, he's not going to have great stats. When you look back further, right, you go back to 2019, the year with
Under
Jalen
Hector.
Hurts, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. Dylan Gabriel finished 8th in the nation with 3,700 passing yards. He had more passing yards that year than Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Sam Howell. I mean, all of those names are crazy good quarterbacks, and he had more than them. So it is proven that Levy can do well with Dylan Gabriel. And Dylan Gabriel was Levy's guy. I mean, before he announced he was going to, before Levy announced he was going to Oklahoma to be their new OC, Dylan Gabriel wanted to go to Ole Miss. And then he decommitted from UCLA when Jeff Levy got hired at OU. So you're getting the quarterback who is in sync with your offensive coordinator. And with Venables, I mean, Levy is going to be running your offense. I mean, it's not like before where you had quote unquote quarterback whisperer at head coach, and then and also OC and 2 guys running the offense. It's Levy's offense now, and he's got his quarterback. So you guys still have offensive potential. I'm not entirely sure what wide receiver talent you have, but you definitely have the quarterback station. It's more sorted than you could be. More sorted than Ole Miss actually right now, which is interesting.
Yeah. As as a fan of the school across that Red River, my opinion on Oklahoma, obviously, is that I think next year y'all gonna struggle. Like 2020 Texas struggle, but not a almost not really. It's gonna be growing pains. Is what I'm trying to say is one on the offense. So Nate, you can agree or disagree here, but like if you look at Jeff Levy, definitely more short passing game focused with long deep shots. With
Okay,
long deep
dude,
shots mixed
I'll be
in.
the one to break down Jeff Levy's offense. He runs a spread run offense. And what's interesting is, although most people attribute him to his passing game, right? He led the SEC in rushing these past 2 years. Well, I think he came in third this year by a couple of yards. He led him last year. And what he likes to do are these easy reads for quarterbacks and vertical, like okay, down the field post, like that's the type of passes he likes to do. Or it's like a lot of zone breakers and stuff like that. But he is a spread run. That's how you would simplify it in the best.
Yeah,
So it is it's like a spread run. A spread system is Big 12 tailored. I mean, he got it from Art Briles at Baylor.
it's a run heavy spread offense with a weird sort of mix with the air raid.
Exactly. Well, it's not even airy. It's just mix.
Not
It's
air
very
raid.
balanced offense.
More.
Yeah, it's just spread run. That's the best way to simplify it. There's
Yes,
not
spread
really
run.
a
Yeah.
way to
The
describe it.
only thing I would say on the offense, at least, is Dylan Gabriel's obviously very used to the offense. I'd say the two best receivers you have left, which I believe are Marvin Mims and Theo Weiss, two very talented guys themselves, are both a lot more experienced with more of a deep ball offense than offense that includes a lot more mid and short passing game. So I'd say it probably takes a game or two, some games to get more acclimated to that. It shouldn't be too much of an issue. It's a lot more. It's a lot harder to adjust from game to deep ball game than the other way around. I'd say on the defense, here's the thing. I know Brad Venables is an amazing defensive coach. The defense is going to suck the first year. That's nothing against Brad Venables. It's just
Talent.
going from Grinch to Venables are two very different defenses. And you can see there's a reason Venables starts like no freshman on his defense. I know that's a common thing on most defenses, but like you need the seniority plays a big role in Venables' defenses. And if a lot of your bigger, a lot of your, if a lot of your seniors, if as many seniors are transferring as you say there, Abby, then it's going to be a struggle the first year. And I gave Sarkisian this excuse year one as well as Kwiatkowski. It's just because of the massive change in scheme, your players aren't going to fit that system, or they're going to take a while to acclimate to that system. I think that's the same thing that's going to happen with Brent Venables.
Mhm.
I still think they'll do decent because it's the Big 12, but yeah,
Now, I'm not saying we're gonna like be. We're. I don't think we're gonna win double-digit games this for a while. But it's not
not for
gonna
a while.
be.
No,
We're not gonna end up
we,
like Kansas. We'll end up like yeah. We'll probably be like y'all this year. I think you'll definitely finish above us, especially with Big Quinn coming back home. But
Big
it's gonna
Quinn.
Big Quinn. I've heard some very interesting names for Quinn Ewers. Some of them are very like
graphic.
very funny, graphic. Some of them are like corny. I remember one.
Interesting.
This
Dude, you're
one
about to
there.
see so many bleached wigs in
I
Austin,
think if
Texas.
you're looking for a Big 12 comparison for Texas, it would probably be, if you're lucky, Baylor. That's a good. You hire a new coach. I think you're probably Baylor under Matt Rule. That's your goal. Or you've
As
had that
Texas or as
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma?
My bad. I don't know why I'm saying Texas.
Yeah.
You said Quinn Ewers, and I just lost brain cells. But yeah, I think Baylor is probably the comparison that you're hoping to get. That's the kind of gradual, strong program build up with
Yeah.
several. I mean, and Baylor did it with 3 head coaches, which is impressive. Hopefully, you can be like Baylor under Matt Rule. That was your goal.
Yeah. So I'd say we also have a good spot to end for today.
Yeah. So, thank you for listening to another episode of the Triple Option Podcast. I'm your co-host Nate Autry, along with Aubrey Dingery and Tarun Duglu. We will have more content coming out soon as we discuss the playoffs in the NFL, which are going on right now. Again, thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.